And we are live. All right. So this is our first podcast, of course. So you think we should introduce ourselves, maybe what our plan is, what we represent, how do you see this?
Yeah, that's actually a good approach, I think. I mean, I guess I'll start, but basically, obviously, I'm a producer, musician, audio engineer. Love fitness, love the mindset of everything that comes with just being, more of an outlier of the industry. Not successful. I don't really like to ever think of it like that. I like to be. I don't know. I just for me, I'm very intrigued by the outliers, the one percenters, the people that the winners. And so, like, I don't know, man. I try to model my life after that. I lose a lot more than them, it seems like, but that's basically me in a nutshell.
And how do you define winning? Like the 1%? Like what is winning?
Oh God, to me, dude, it just I could break it down to so many different things, but winning your day, beating that workout. Today, I just struggled in the shower, making sure I made it through that time. I think that's winning right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the cold showers for people that are not knowing what he's talking about. Like Robert and I really got into the Wim Hof method, and one part of that is cold showers. So it's sometimes tough to get through, but afterwards you feel
Yep,
great, right?
very true, man. Very true. Go ahead.
And that's what we discussed. I don't know when this was, like a few weeks back. Like what the body needs and what the body wants is not the same thing at all. Like you don't want that cold shower, but you need it. Like you don't want that spinach. You want a pizza, but you don't need that. You don't want to work out, but your body needs it. So it's not the
It,
same
no
at all.
joke, man. Like that's and you know it, man. My philosophy in life is everything's backwards, and typically the things we're running from is the things we need to run towards, and that really is true. It's very true, and I knew it today, man. I'm like, I feel it inside of me. Like whenever I feel weak, I'm like, this is the moment I gotta like get through it. You know what I'm saying? Like I cannot give up now because I think in the moments when you're strong and you're strong minded and like you kind of you don't get through it all the way, that's not as damaging to the mind. It is when you're like weak and because you're going to constantly teach your mind the habit of like running away when you're weak. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And it's also, I think, the short term versus the long term. Let me place this. Yeah, okay. So in the short term, you think you don't want that, but on the long term, it will benefit you, right? So let's take the cold showers, for instance. Like on the short term, you're looking up to it, like, I don't want to do it. But in the long term, it's going to feel great. So it may not feel great now, but in the long term, it will
Yeah,
pay off.
100%, man. You know, I was cuz
So the
go
long
ahead.
term, no, go
Uh
ahead. Hey, go
you know,
you.
I was going to cuz I wanted to bring this up. It's funny that we're even talking about this now. Cuz of my moment in the shower and what I was thinking about was when you described to me when you jumped into the lake and then you got to get out of the lake. So the lake wasn't the problem. It was actually getting out of the lake and getting home. And that brought me back to when I was in the river. And then I think about Wim Hof and I'm like, how is this guy like jumping into these cold lakes and then getting out in freezing weather and still dealing with it? That's a whole other level I haven't reached yet. And I know that right there is the level I want to kind of try to get to. Because you could probably bring yourself back to that moment, man. How hard was that? To get through that.
Yeah, it's funny because we thought we were already done. And that was kind of the cool challenge. Like we were done, the swing was okay, and then we went out, and then the party
Yeah,
started.
dude. Yeah. And I'm sure you were shivering
So
uncontrollably, right?
yeah, just but that was the weird thing. Like when we walked back, I was like talking to my friend, and I couldn't talk and couldn't move my lips and my mouth. It was just I was shivering, and I started to do the breathing. Like, I need to hold on for a bit longer, and then it happened like this. I could talk. I was like, I'm warm. I could talk again. Like my mouth is okay. And he was like, what the hell? What's happening? I was like, I don't know. It's
So you
completely
started
gone.
the breathing method and that like kind of brought the blood back in and warmed you up, is what you think?
Yeah, and combined with the mindset, just
Letting go.
like you talk about this all the time, like letting go.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was so weird.
Yeah, dude.
And I was like, fine, I could walk home, and I was the last one to take the warm showers. Like I was okay. So it's a combination of the breathing, but also indeed what you're saying, like just let it
Yeah,
go.
it's such a big one. I think that that's what my battle was today. And what I really had to do to myself is just I had to start screaming at myself like a drill sergeant. Quit being a bitch. Like this is it's not going to kill you, you know. And like I remember thinking about that, and then once I pump myself up, sometimes that's the letting go for me, you know. Then I let it go. I'm like, it's not a big deal anymore. So that does happen to me for sure. I think it's more difficult though, like because that's what I was trying to connect to is that moment when you got out of the lake. Like you said, you thought it was over. It was over for me, you know. And you know I'm in a you know heated room now. You know what I'm saying? You're outside, so like I was trying to envision myself being in that situation. I don't know, man. I don't know if I could have got through it today. You know,
We kind of had no choice. Like we still had
no
to walk
joke,
home.
man.
So
And it did make
uh,
me think of like I said when I did that river with my brother and my sister in law. And actually, like what you talked about, man, I didn't really get the shivering in the mouth, but like my feet weren't working, and I had to stop them for a second. I'm like, I can't walk right because my feet were so numb, I couldn't feel the bottom of them.
yeah, that's your body like protecting all your organs and your insides, so the blood flows away out of your fingers and toes and goes to the center, of course, to keep that safe.
Absolutely, man. You know, like as
uh,
brutal as it sounds, though, like how good did you feel afterwards?
it was
Isn't it?
fucking amazing. It was like we felt cozy as well. Like we're like, oh, we did this and we had some tea on the couch and I was like, this is
Dude,
fucking
that's how I
great.
feel right now.
Just
Like I
feels
feel
amazing.
cozy, just what you
Yeah.
said. Like I feel really warm inside after a cold shower. It's like so backwards.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
I
so
love it,
crazy.
man. Like I live
And
for it now, you know?
exactly. And I want to elaborate a bit more on Wim Hof a bit later because like the first question is like what are we going to represent during
Sure.
this podcast, and we start talking about Wim Hof. Well, that's basically what we're going to represent in this podcast, going from left to right.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Like we share a lot of passions like fitness, music. Obviously, we do it both. We talk about mindset, about spirituality, about the world. So I think in this podcast it's going to be a bunch of everything,
Totally.
basically. Just what we want to talk about, just to have a cool discussion, have a cool conversation, maybe inspire people as well to learn about Wim Hof or anything else. So it's funny how kind of the first question was a good example of what we
Most
represent.
definitely.
It's kind of, so
When
that's
I
pretty
think
cool.
that like too, like those are like the specifics. So like the fitness and the mindset and all that, like that's getting into the specifics. But like even people overall, if you're not into fitness, you're not into music, we still talk about a lot of stuff you could use for your life. You know, just that it's really things that you could apply to anything, not just fitness, but you know, going in for your test. It's just what we're saying, like letting go of the nerves and whatever's holding you back. Like these things you could take with you in life. It doesn't have to just apply to fitness or the specifics that we discuss.
Yeah, it's like universal, right? Like it applies to everything. A good example is like when my song Sunday She Got Awake got pulled off of Spotify. Like it fucking sucks. Like I said, I was like in a bubble of an hour of like being in a bad mood. But then I started to realize like how do I do this in fitness like when I get an injury, Like I cannot control it at the moment. I just have to let it go for now. I'll have to figure it out, but don't worry about it too much because it happened. So why worry about the past? So it's kind of the same. It applies to fitness, but it also applies to now my music business. So that's cool how you say that because that's so
Yeah,
true.
and you know what, man? Like you're touching on something very important. I think that most people can't connect to this unless you're a musician. But you said something to me that's very important, and I related to it deeply. And you said it felt like a breakup, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Is like when your songs get taken down off the internet, or say if your hard drive crashes and you lose something that you worked really hard at. It would be like anything in art or even an injury. Like this is it feels like a breakup. It's super devastating on our mind. And these happen like in tests. It happens in you know just you sitting in class and if you like mess up on a question or something in front of the class like it jacks you all up and you may walk away from that like really feeling like crap about yourself. And like these are the things it's the whole point of letting go, right? It's the whole point of it.
Exactly. And it's a weird thing in high school. Like I remember, but that's for everybody, I guess. Like if you compare yourself now to being in high school, like you're a different person. Like
Yeah.
it's insane. In only a couple of years, how you can change so much.
Yeah, truly.
It's the same. No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's you're so right, man. I think that like especially in high school, they're very impactful moments in our life, and like I go back to them, you know, like they were yesterday. But to think of myself back then and then compare myself to today, like this is two different people. I live two different lives, and that and like you said, it happened so quickly, you know. And I think that that's probably maybe a confliction we deal with in our heads, and why it's so hard to let go sometimes because we're still gripping to something that's already like rapidly past, and like we got to let that go before we could even move forward with our future. You know what I'm saying? Some people are still stuck in high school at 30, you know?
Yeah, it's cool how you describe that, like the past, holding on to that. Because the reason I began fitness, I only realized that, yeah, years later, was because I was bullied like when I was younger. So I used my fitness to feel good, to protect myself, to have those all those endorphins and dopamines running and feel confident again, And then I developed kind of a bit of an ego, but I needed that to survive, to survive my trauma. And like years later, I realized, that's why it started. Of course, that's not the reason anymore. Now I do it for mindset, for health, overall feeling good. But looking back on that, like you're saying, you still hold on to those traumas and you trying to fight through it. So just imagine me not realizing that that's the reason why it started. Like 6 years later, is not realizing why I started my fitness.
Yeah, I think that's a good reflection, man. It's a really good reflection for sure. It's what it does too. Is it I think like like talking about the ego and like allowing all like without that experience, you wouldn't be the person you are today. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's what's cool about it is the fact that like when we go and we experience like we'll say like traumas or anything things that we can't let go in our past, we needed to go through that, but we also need to learn to let go. So that's what's the hard part about it. I think that like no matter what, we have to go through these things, but we also have to learn to let them go after we go through them. And I think that those two things, like they love to fight against each other and conflict in our head, because I mean, you and I talked about it yesterday. I mean, we're building sandcastles, and I just love that saying so much because that's what our
Yeah,
life is. Like everything is born to die. Even the T-shirt that you're wearing right now is going to go away. Your shoes, everything, absolutely everything. And like
yeah,
when you think of that, it's like you have to let go, man. Have to. It's life.
yeah. And I even had that with death. Like I love that analogy of like we're building sandcastles. Like you can build a great, wonderful sandcastle, but once that water starts running, like there's a point it's gonna reach it, right? And the sandcastle is just gonna disappear. Like it's the same with life and death. And I started realizing like I'm not really afraid to die, which is kind of a weird concept because we're still humans, we're still animals. So of course, when it comes to it, of course you're still gonna be afraid. But the whole concept of dying is like you realize you're part of like a big universe with frequencies and connections, and we're only so small. Like if you look at the whole universe, we're only so
Totally.
small. So it kind of helps me with like realizing I'm gonna die. My parents are gonna pass away. My grandparents are getting really old, and there comes a time they're gonna pass away, and that's also part of life.
Yeah, dude, those are the hard ones too, and it's all coming. It's all coming for us. And you're so right about not only focusing on it but thinking about it a lot because there's that Roman saying, "Memento mori," and it means love fate. Basically, it means just love whatever comes your way, and that whole saying is basically directed around death because it's coming. It's coming for us all, and that's something we all have to accept. And I think that the quicker we accept it, the better we are with it. Also, it reminds us of our mortality, that we're mortal, and tomorrow could not be given to us. So live today, And I think it's important for sure.
Yeah, I heard this story about a punishment that someone, as like of course like a fiction story, but still pretty cool. Like as a punishment, someone had mortality on Earth. He had to live on Earth forever. Like that was his
Interesting.
punishment, and that was like the biggest punishment he ever could have gotten, because without dying, there is no value of living. So that's why it's weird to fear death, because the opposite is life, and that's like a great thing. So there is no one without the other.
Exactly, dude. That's like the so insightful, and for me, like I know that the moment I realized that, that's when things really get drawn into deep perspective. Like it all has to be here. Violence has to be here. Love has to be here. Sadness, happiness, all of it. Like without one, there isn't the other. The yin and the yang. You know what I mean? And actually, Eric Weinstein broke down a beautiful way of thinking of this. And of course, I'm gonna paraphrase and probably ruin it, but he talked about a like think of a utensil drawer with spoons, forks, and knives. We all know that knife is there to commit violence. It's there to rip up the fruit so you could get the meat out of it, or cut up the meat or whatever. And the fruit wants you to do that so you could eat the meat and you could spread the seed. but you're not going to throw away that knife because it commits violence. Like, it has to be there. And I just thought that was beautiful, because like that's really life. Like, we need that there. If without that there, like there is no circle of life. It just doesn't happen this way. And is that a big pill to swallow? I think so, for sure. But like, I think it makes things a little easier when you think of it like that. Just knowing that like some things are inevitable. You just can't change it.
Yeah, and that's where I think faith comes in as well, or from other people that may be religion or a certain belief. Like, we have these uncertainties in life, like death, and if you believe in something or have a certain faith in that, it helps with um, processing that whole thing of like the concept of death.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I totally agree. It's death is such a tricky subject, and I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about it, and they get very uncomfortable when you bring it up. But we're all going to deal with it, man. We're all gonna. It's not worth ignoring.
No, it's impossible to ignore because it's there for
Totally.
sure. So,
And
what do you believe? Like, when you die, like, what happens?
I don't know, dude. I think there's something else. That's about all I got. Like, I don't think that we just like wither away and it's just done. I believe that. I don't know if there's a new life that you're born into, or if our consciousness just lives on. That's kind of something I've went back and forth on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, this is a tricky question. For a big part, I believe in uh, coincidences. Um, like, we live on Earth not because it's made. This is what I believe. This is not truth, but this is what I believe. Not because it's made, but because like we just have the right distance to the sun, so we have enough water, so life could develop. It's all just a big coincidence to me. But I do believe is when we die, like, I don't think I don't know. I cannot even answer this question. It's such a complicated question. I think we are an energy that will continue. I don't know if we have a soul or like still a personality or consciousness that will live on, but I think the energy will live on.
Yeah,
Because where does energy go? We are made of out of energy. Like, when we die, like, where does that go? Does it just disappear in thin air? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah, I agree with you completely. Actually, I think that you pretty much kind of explained what I was trying to say. It's just there's some sort of energy after this. I think my neighbor, man, I had a discussion with him, and he had a really really interesting way of putting it. And he did psychedelics one time, and this is what brought him to this conclusion. But he said that he had like a profound vision inside of this trip that he was on, and basically it brought him to his past. And he was a cowboy, and he was protecting his family, and so it was in the Western civilization, and he was being overran by the Native Americans. And he says when he was there, like literally sitting there, that it came into his mind. Is like, oh, I just got to let this go. Surprisingly, and he's like, death's coming for me. Like, I'm gonna die. And he realized in that moment that like he was talking to this person, but that was him. And then he explained it like he says that life goes like this. So can you see that how I'm doing this? So it'd go up and then down like that.
Yeah.
And he says that. So these are your lives, and then it comes back together, and then goes out, and then comes back together. And he says that in that moment he realized his life stopped, and then he started a new one. And so that kind of hit me hard, man. Where I was like, maybe we are energies. Maybe we do live in the past, and maybe we do get reborn. There's so much things that are unexplained to where.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. It's like yeah, and we don't know for sure. Like, nobody knows for sure. Like, the only way to figure out is to die, but let's not find that out for another like 80
Exactly,
years.
man. Let's live our life first, right?
Exactly. But the fact that I was stumbling so much, like, explains it's so hard to even think about what's after this.
Totally.
Like, I don't. There's not one thing for me that is the truth. Like, it's not then I follow a certain religion that says this or says that. Like, I don't know. Like, that's my true answer. I don't know. And it's funny how you touch on that neighbor with a psychedelic experience, with the time kind of going like this. It reminds me of Einstein is saying like the the past and the future is just an illusion. Like, the past, the now, and the future are all happening at the same time, and that's such a difficult subject for me to still comprehend. Like, I'm diving into it, but it's still difficult for me to
Yeah,
understand.
I agree with you. Like whenever I get into those type of philosophies and how they create these I don't know equations, I guess we could call them. I agree, man. I get super confused inside of them. Like how they talk about all these inner dimensions, and I don't know, man. Stuff gets crazy, but it's like it's so mind bending. But it's like you have to listen to it, you know.
Yeah, it's like no way around it,
Yeah, I
kind of.
get drawn into those conversations. Like most of the time, I think you mentioned it to me yesterday. But you're like, I got to stop, look up what they're talking about, so I could understand it, and then get back to the conversation. And that happens to me a lot when I'm like listening to, these physics professors or whatever. I'm like, I don't even know this word, what this word means, let alone like this sentence. So I gotta go look this up.
I had a I watched a lecture of David Icke, and the lecture was like 9 hours,
That's what it was.
but it took me 3 months to fucking listen to it. Like I had to look up everything. Like I had so much I didn't understand. Like look up, and then okay, I watched the other documentary for a certain subject, and then I watched that documentary, and then I could continue with the lecture. Like it was so
Yeah,
crazy.
dude, that happens to me a lot, man. And like, I always find myself I'm like, this is just too much. It's too much. It's like you couldn't possibly learn everything in the world. Like, it's so much, man. It's just nonstop.
Nah, just it's impossible. But that's kind of what I experienced as well. Like this whole finding out, this whole awakening is kind of like a vicious circle because you experience something or you find something out, and that draws 10 more questions. And then you have answers to those 10 more questions, and then you have another 100 more questions. And like it doesn't stop. Like you just draw into this and you realize, like, I'm never going to discover it all. There's no way. It's impossible.
Yeah, dude. It's so funny that you're saying all that because like that's what happened to me in working out today. Well, it's been happening to me, but like I'm starting to realize that calisthenics should have been a big focus of mine, or at least should have been doing these mobility and body movements. You know what I mean? Those would have kept me strong for powerlifting, and I probably could have went on and hit all my goals and done everything that like I was really close to doing it all. And when I'm looking back, I'm like, oh man, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I think about it? And then just raise all these other questions. So it's just as you mentioned, like when you learn new things, it just opens up this whole book of new knowledge where you're like, I'm back to square one. I didn't just learn a new thing. I learned that I've been messing up in this area. So like back to square one. And I think those are like bittersweet moments. Like for me, I'm always like, cool. Well, I got a new direction and it's a better one. So I'm happy about that. Sucks that I messed up for years, but hey, it's looking forward, not back anymore.
Exactly. Like we discussed before, you cannot look back. I have the same with my songs. Like if you listen to my first song, like I would never release that right now. So you can go back to remix it and re-record it, but in 2 years from now, those songs you've done today, 2 years from now, you want to do that to your songs for today. So you're going to have that circle of re-recording every song over the period of few years. Like that's impossible. Like there's no way for you to do that. So it's just that's there. I learned my lesson. Now move on to the next
I bet
project.
you this correlates with what Einstein was saying and how the past and the future come together. Why go back there? It's just what you said. Like you got something else up here. So you keep going back here. It's like all happening simultaneously. You know what I'm saying? So if you're trying to go to the past, it's already
Yeah.
done. Why not just focus on the future? You're actually going to get a better result when you do the same thing for your future that you think you need to do in your past. Something like that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was thinking about his theory, and there's like um, a physiological way of thinking of his theory, but also thinking in like a spiritual way, thinking of his theory. The spiritual way is like, don't hang on to your past. Like there is only now, and there's nothing you can change, right? But there's also like this quantum physics theory, is that it's not just a spiritual way of thinking to it, but it's raining. Like
I
I don't
could
know if you
kind of
can
hear
hear it
it.
in the
Yeah, a little
microphone.
bit.
Yeah. But anyways, so I was diving into his time theory, like the relatively, how do you say that? Like the time is
Uh-huh.
relative, right?
I was going to say that relative time theory.
Uh,
I was going to ask you about it. Sure.
yeah, yeah. And it's so crazy that like the moment you travel faster, or the moment you're closer to a subject or an object, sorry, that has more gravity pull, the time will go slower.
Yeah.
So if you spend a year on Mount Everest, time will go faster because you're further away from the center of gravity of the Earth. That means time goes faster, and you will be able to celebrate New Year's Eve like 1 millisecond earlier than the rest of the world. So imagine being far out or traveling with the speed of light. You can have that's the theory of Einstein. Like they put a twin, one put him on a rocket ship, and that one will travel for a year at the speed of light. Because of that speed, time will go slower. If you come back to your twin, like the age is not going to
Right.
be the same. One is going to be older, the other one is going to be younger. Like
Dude,
how
like
crazy is that?
it's so funny you bringing this up because like I dove into this concept about a year ago and like blew my mind. So to coattail that, he has a really really crazy example. But he says if you take a mother that had a baby that day, that you give the baby a watch and the mother a watch that keeps the exact same time, never ever gets off. You know they're going to keep the same time. You look at it 10 years later, the baby watch will read a different time as the mom. And it depends on how fast and how slow they live. I'm like, what? I mean, dude,
That's
it literally
crazy.
goes down to like, okay, like you and I could be a good example, right? So like I try to squeeze, I get my 8 hours of sleep and then I try to do my 16 hours of like, I really try to squeeze as much just being productive out of that time as I can. And so there's other people out there that only do 8 hours of that time. That means that I could accomplish double what they could accomplish, right? So that means I live 2 lifetimes compared to them. And so when I think of things like that, you could really take this relative time theory and you could utilize it to your benefit when you really try to apply those concepts. Like if I work an hour more than everybody, what would that compound over 30 years time? Like you're going to be a 1%er because you outworked everyone. It
That's
is, man.
crazy.
Like and like the concept really takes me back, man. It does.
And with that watch thing, it's also because no watch is alike. So even if you have like a super accurate watch, like there's no watch in the world or no clock in the world that runs simultaneously to compared to another clock.
Well, he's trying to say that
So
if it is the same, if we could get 2 clocks that would be the same, and where you would give the people and they keep the exact same time, it would still be 2 different times because they live 2 different lives. Yeah,
even then, even
yeah, and
then,
that's what his theory was. And yeah,
that's
dude, when I
crazy.
heard him break that down, I'm like, what the heck? Like I've never even explored that as an option, let alone think it would be true. You know what I mean? Because it just doesn't make sense. Like logically, it doesn't make sense, but it does.
It's
It
so
is.
crazy. It is so crazy. And it reminds me of the movie
Ex-
Interstellar as well. I don't know if
Totally
you've
have,
seen that
man.
one. Like where they travel to another planet and then they come back and their children are older than
Exactly.
they are. Like what
And
the
that's
hell?
what it is. That's exactly what it is, man. That's the relative time theory. If you go to space and you're traveling at a super fast speed, your children are going to be far older than what you are when you come back. And that's where it's backwards. Like I was trying to
Exactly.
explain this to my wife, but I'm like, the faster you go, the younger you'll be. The slower you go, the older you'll be. So it's almost opposite. You know what I mean? And like, I think that this is so when I really dove deep in my mind of like why this is like, this is how I imagine it. The person that's going is actually working and happy and moving. The one that's not is sitting around, maybe soaking in their sorrows or depressed or just not doing much with their mental or physical. So that's why they wither away quicker. That's why they get older. Is because they're not utilizing their time. That's totally on me. Like I don't know how true that is, but
Yeah,
that's how I made sense of it in my head.
that's pretty cool actually. Well, it is proven that the physics in the universe apply to the physics here. So if you look at our solar system moves into a vortex. Like I sent you
It's
that video a
amazing.
while
Yeah.
back, where like of course we are rotating like this, but we're also rotating around the sun. But the sun is also moving like towards a certain direction, and
We're
we are
chasing it.
following
Yeah.
that exactly. And that spiral, like we can frame that back all the way to our DNA.
To flowers,
Our DNA is literally yeah,
everything.
exactly. It's like literally a
Mm-hmm.
vortex. Like that's crazy. So your theory might not be that off because what I say, things that apply in the universe apply to our cells, our tiny cells on our planet. So couldn't be
And
far off.
I'm pretty stupid when it comes down to textbooks, but like philosophy has been like something that just like it's just got inside of me, man, and I just get it. And that's like when I think about things, that's how I try to like make sense of it in my head. Is I just try to compare and so I think that that's what you're talking about. Like for me, like when it's the universe, I'm just somehow could connect to it, through philosophy because we're all interconnected, and like I had
Yeah.
this like this is a ridiculous, crazy thought, but I feel like we could solve any problem in our head. I don't think we need Google. I don't think we need encyclopedias or information or people teaching us. I think if we go deep enough inside of us, the answers are there.
Yeah, that's what I like about the phrase of Dennis McKenna, is that we're getting more intelligent, but we're not getting more wise.
There's two different
I
things.
was like, that was so, yeah, that's so spot on. Like, we have our technologies and we can fly to the moon and we have AI and algorithm decide stuff for us on internet and all that stuff, but we're not being happy. We're still destroying the planet. We're lacking in love and compassion. I was like, because those are not the same thing. Like being wise and being intelligent don't have to be the same thing. They can be, but they don't have to
Totally.
be. So that was like a pretty cool thought as for
There,
me as
yeah, I
well.
love that. I love that. And I actually discuss wisdom versus intelligence all the time because they are entirely different things. I feel like the wise soul is going to be more compassionate and more prefrontal cortex driven, and the intelligent people are the thinkers. So they are more driven by logic, which is typically the ego side. And so you'll see a lot of those people that don't want to look at wisdom, and they get like, I think those are the ones that usually kind of grip to their ideas really hard. It's hard for them to be open minded. I think that's the danger in it. Intelligence could really hold you back because you get so locked into that textbook thing, and it like has to be this. You know what I'm saying? Like it can't be anything outside of it. That's where I see the danger in intelligence.
And it could be cool if we could interlock those two subjects together, like use our intelligence to be wiser
Mm-hmm.
people. That would be, we can solve anything. Like you say, you can solve any problem within yourself just going inside,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting. Like if we use that wisdom to solve our problems in the world, like the plastic problem, for instance, like we we can easily develop the technology to have an alternative for plastic. Like if it's necessary, we can produce that in a day. I'm sure. I'm
Absolutely.
sure
Yep.
about that. But we are being held back by money and I don't know other. Do you have other examples
I
like
call it the system. The
just
system. It's what it
yeah,
is, man. Like
yeah,
it's like
basically.
we
Yeah,
created it. We voted all that stuff in, and like it's so sad when I really think deep about it. But it's just like there's not much we could do. It's the system, and to break that system is going to be a very, very hard task.
yeah. And I liked your phrase about when people point to the system, they think about it as like the government or a certain elite group. But then you said something spot on, like we created, we are the system. So in order to change that, we need to change ourselves and stop
Yeah,
pointing fingers. I was like, that's I was aware of not pointing, but not about thinking of the system as myself instead of like an elite government group, you know? I was like, that's pretty cool. Like more people should look into that in that
yeah.
way.
That realization hit me pretty hard too when I thought of it, and I'm like.